A tragic day in Uvalde, the Robb Elementary School shooting. Uvalde, Texas, is a small town of about 15,000 residents, tucked away in the heart of the Lone Star State. Known for its close-knit community, Uvalde was a town where everyone knew everyone, where families gathered at the local diner, and where children ran through the streets on hot summer days. It was a place where the struggles of the world seemed far away, where life was simple, and where people took pride in the bonds they shared. But on May 24, 2022, a horrific tragedy struck this peaceful town, forever altering its sense of security. Robb Elementary School, a bright beacon of education in the center of Uvalde, became the site of one of the deadliest school shootings in modern American history. On that fateful day, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, a troubled young man from the town, walked into the school and opened fire on innocent children and teachers, killing 19 students and 2 teachers. Several others were injured in the attack, and the shockwaves of this violence rippled across the community, the state of Texas, and the entire nation. Salvador Ramos, or Robb as some of his classmates called him, was not always the name people would associate with violence and tragedy. Born into a broken home, Robb was a quiet, isolated boy who struggled to find his place in the world. His mother, a woman battling alcohol addiction, and his father, who was incarcerated for much of his life, left Robb to grow up with little guidance or support. But even with the love of his grandmother, Robb's life was far from easy. He was often bullied at school, an easy target for classmates who taunted him because of his weight, his family's struggles, and his appearance. The nickname Robb was not a term of affection. It was the name he had come to identify with, the boy from a broken family, the one nobody cared to understand. His peers mocked him for being too fat, for having a mother who was perpetually drunk, and for a father who was locked away behind bars. They called him names, pushed him around in the hallways, and ignored him during lunch breaks. His teachers, though kind, never seemed to notice the depth of his pain. To them, he was just another student who struggled to fit in, but in the quiet corners of his mind, Robb's hurt ran deeper than anyone realized. Each day, he returned to school trying to be a better version of his parents. He tried to keep his head down, to make something of himself, but the mocking voices of his classmates haunted him. His self-esteem was eroded with every taunt, every cruel word. And yet, through it all, Robb pushed on, hoping that one day, things would get better. But the world around him continued to pull him into a darker place. On the morning of May 24, 2022, Robb woke up in a haze of sadness. His heart was heavy, and tears welled up in his eyes as he thought about his life. He had been thinking about the pain for days, the way the bullying had consumed him, the way his mother had neglected him, and the absence of his father in his life. He went to his grandmother's house, as he did every morning, and there he confided in her. Robb told her that he had enough, that he couldn't take the cruelty any longer, that he felt like he was invisible. In a moment of desperation, he whispered the words that would mark the beginning of the tragedy. "I'm going to end it all." His grandmother, alarmed and frightened, tried to calm him, to tell him that things could get better, that he had a future ahead of him. But Robb was already too far gone. In a fit of rage and sorrow, he pulled out a gun that he had obtained earlier, and he shot his grandmother in the face. The bullet critically injured her, leaving her in a state of unconsciousness. She was left to bleed, unable to stop him as he made his way out of the house and into the streets. Robb then set out toward Robb Elementary School, the same school where he had once been a student, the school that had become the symbol of his misery. The school, which was just a short distance from his grandmother's house, was preparing for the last few days of the academic year. The children inside were eagerly awaiting the summer break, unaware that the nightmare was about to unfold just beyond the school gates. Robb walked into the school armed with a rifle and began his rampage. The attack was swift and brutal. He entered 2 classrooms and opened fire on the students and teachers inside, shooting without mercy. The children, some as young as 9 years old, were caught in the crossfire of a terror they couldn't comprehend. Teachers who tried to protect their students were also struck down, their lives ended in an instant. The gunfire echoed through the hallways, and the students who were able to flee ran for their lives, leaving behind their classmates who were helplessly trapped. The school was plunged into chaos, with teachers and staff desperately trying to call for help. Some hid in classrooms with their students, praying for rescue, while others did what they could to barricade the doors and protect the children. Police arrived on the scene within minutes, but the chaos was overwhelming. Officers rushed into the building, trying to locate the shooter and evacuate the children. In the end, Rob was cornered by law enforcement and killed in an exchange of gunfire. His life, marked by pain and isolation, came to a violent and tragic end. The shooting at Robb Elementary School sent shockwaves through the community of Uvalde. The small town, where everyone knew each other, was left reeling from the loss of innocent lives. The victims, 19 children and 2 teachers, were mourned by families who had sent their children to school that day, unaware that they would never return. The town, which had once been a safe haven, now found itself forever changed. The grief was palpable, and the questions lingered. Why did Rob do this? How could a young man, so deeply hurt by the world around him, lash out in such a violent way? In the days that followed, it became clear that Rob's actions were a result of years of isolation, bullying, and neglect. The pain he had carried with him for so long had festered into rage. His mother's addiction, his father's absence, and the bullying at school had all contributed to a sense of hopelessness that led him to commit this unspeakable act. The tragedy also sparked renewed debates about gun violence, mental health, and bullying in America. Families across the nation mourned the victims of Robb Elementary, but they also questioned how a young man like Rob could slip through the cracks, how the signs of his pain were missed, and what could have been done to prevent the horror that unfolded on that day. In the wake of the attack, Uvalde began the long, painful process of healing. The families of the victims, while devastated, stood together, supporting each other as they tried to make sense of the unthinkable. The community, known for its resilience, began to rebuild, honoring the memory of the children and teachers lost in the tragedy. Rob's story was not just the story of a school shooting. It was a story of a broken young man, a product of an environment that failed to recognize the signs of his suffering. The pain he experienced, the bullying he endured, and the lack of support he had all played a role in shaping the tragic outcome of that day. While Uvalde will forever carry the scars of the tragedy, the town's spirit remains unbroken. The memory of the victims lives on in the hearts of those who knew them, and their legacy serves as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, communities can come together to heal, to support each other, and to ensure that the memory of those lost is never forgotten.